Hey guys.
Hey,
Welcome back everyone to the MSP Cyber Roundtable. We're here with Nick. I hope I'm getting this right. Scozzaro and Ameen
got it.
Sait from ShadowHQ.
Yeah.
Um, we're going to be talking more about ShadowHQ later. But Nick, you were just beginning to regale me about your collision experience, which is a pretty big
Yeah.
entrepreneurial conference in downtown Toronto. It's the biggest conference in the city. Is that right? Or it's a big
It
deal,
was
right? They expanded the conference center.
it was pretty big. But thank you, Matt. It's good to see you again. I just spent a couple days out in Toronto, not too far from where we are. Collision, so it's a startup and even scale type of conference. It really is a lot of like companies meeting investors and companies meeting other companies. But what really blew me away was how global it is, and I didn't expect to see that. But major countries, small countries, all having booths, representations there. So I thought it was pretty cool. And it's too bad there was no Euro Cup game at the time that I could see if there were any of the fanatics there. But it was a pretty good day.
Well, I had the opportunity to go a few years ago, and it really helped me touch in with the Canadian market. And you're right. I think definitely on the vendor side, but also the attendee side, there was a lot of people from all over the place. So that was it's really interesting. But was it Amin? Are you the one who just told me they're moving to Vancouver next year? That's the plan.
Yeah, so they're moving out of Toronto. I think they've been here for around 4 or 5 years. Yeah, so I think it's already come in the news that the next year's event will be in Vancouver and not Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, Amin, why don't we start with you? Tell the audience who's Amin Sait.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Ameen Sait. I'm currently on the board of advisors of ShadowHQ. So my background is primarily cybersecurity. I was with IBM Security Services for about 14 years, and then the chief revenue officer of a smaller cybersecurity endpoint firm. Prior to that, actually, I was still in cybersecurity, but with Mercedes in the UK and then with Riyadh Bank in Saudi Arabia. So spent almost 20 plus years in cybersecurity. And the thing is that right now, as you can see, what's happening in the market, a lot of cybersecurity companies, the smaller ones, are getting amalgamated into the bigger ones. Whether it's Google or whether it is IBM, cybersecurity companies are being kind of bought over, and I think you're going to see this over the next few years, Matt, and that um, so a lot of the smaller players are going to be now bought out, and a lot of the bigger companies will be streamlining a whole series of solutions. That integrated solution road, as far as cybersecurity, is something that is going to be very interesting over the next couple of years.
Well, I don't try to speculate more than 5 years out these days because I'm just perennially wrong. but yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen, like the Mondiant roll up was like a big deal, right? And we're going to go over the Verizon breach report in a few minutes, but you're right; these big players certainly have market dominance. Uh, but that's the nature of entrepreneurial or really innovation these days, right? Is
Mhm.
you've got entrepreneurial companies that go into disruptive market spaces and they do all the R&D for free, and then big companies get to choose the winners. So that makes a lot of sense. Nick, tell us about you. Have you been in security forever, or like Amin, or
Well, first I have to say, Amina, I love how global your history is. My entire story all happens within the same 50 miles. So where I was born, I went to school, I worked at BlackBerry, which arguably was a security company first before anything. So I spent about 15 years there right after graduation. When I joined there, I had youth, I had hair, and I left there as head of enterprise mobility engineering, where I went into, like, my background being software development. I went in and started a software company called MobiStream, where got to focus on what I thought was going to be digital transformation, but secure communications and collaborations continued to follow us, and found ourselves supporting the cybersecurity space now with our current endeavor on Shadow HQ.
Well, let's rewind a little bit. I
Sure.
would love whatever you can share that you're allowed to share about your BlackBerry or research and motion, right? Stories because long before the BlackBerry, like I'm a geek's geek, man. Like I've been
Yeah.
following QNX forever, and
Yeah.
it's still flying around in space. So, uh, how long were you there? When were you there?
So I started right after 9/11, and then I left, in 2015.
So
Um,
that's a long time. You saw the story arc
yeah.
of
So
research and motion into BlackBerry, right?
yep, yeah, from the very first layoffs we did in 2001, we got rid of 10% of the company. I just, and then after that, it was just hockey stick growth. But what was cool about BlackBerry is, if you're working on a project, you knew everything about it. You knew what the requirements were, what it was for. But there were other projects that you just didn't quite know who the end person was going to use, or you just didn't have a lot of details. So you knew those were like top secret or something for. I shouldn't say top secret, but they were internally secret. And so,
Well,
if you were deploying base stations in a country that someone went to war with, but you were supporting the Department of the Navy, you thought that was pretty cool. This is going back to 2001. So
the BlackBerry was really an innovative device. Not necessarily the endpoint itself. I mean,
sure.
there were smart portable devices before that, although
Yeah.
certainly the BlackBerry was cheap and ubiquitously available before the iPhone. Really, it was the encrypted network, which
Yeah.
in security terms, there was a very special thing that BlackBerry did, which was they fought the encryption war with governments all over the world to make encryption okay. Because there was a time not that long ago when it was not clear that encryption was going to be um, allowed in computing.
Yeah.
There was a period of time in at the beginning of that BlackBerry arc when big governments, including the U.S., including India, including the U.K., including other places, where the general guidance from the government is we need a backdoor, into every piece of encrypted anything,
Matt,
and
don't do this to me.
you're just having nightmares about that time.
There may have been a showdown with a particular country that Friday at 5 o'clock, I got pulled in and asked that we needed something by Monday. But no country ever pulled BlackBerry from. I'm not saying there's a back door, but
There,
uh,
No, yeah, but there was a lot of back and forth on that,
yeah,
and I there was even there was going to be special microchips that we all had to have in our devices that allowed the government in, right? Um, I forget the name. It was the V chip, right?
yeah,
And then there was other versions of it after that, but I've got fond memories of that valiant fight, fought by on the nonprofit side, the F,
yeah,
but on the commercial side, it really was Research in Motion that became BlackBerry that
yeah.
made it okay for us to all be have any chance of cyber safety, here in
Sure.
2024. So,
Y-
um,
You know,
th- thanks for your service.
nonsense. No, I can't say that. It honestly, it was remarkable just being part of this incredible journey that changed the way the world communicates, and they did. So from instant messaging, from mobile communications, the closest thing was Palm Pilot at the time that was just didn't have radios on it. So I mean, the evidence is there every day. Like the legacy of BlackBerry exists every day. So it was awesome being a part of that, and but it's hard to ever follow anything that big. So it was really cool, and I appreciate all my time there.
All right. Well, I skipped over the intermediary time, but we'll get back to what led you to Shadow HQ in a little while. Today we're going to be, the Verizon annual data breach
Yeah,
report came out a few weeks ago. I'd love to spend a few minutes just doing some highlights. The
sure.
report itself is highlights, but it's super dense. So we're going to take a few minutes and do that. So with that, here we go. So this is the 17th year of the Verizon data breach report. In the security industry, a lot of the big professional services firms do do annual security reports. What's particularly interesting about the Verizon report is, first of all, in terms of security services, it's a large industry footprint, but also they have data continuity from year to year. So they're really able to track trends in ways that organizations that have not been doing this for 17 years aren't able to do. So that's super interesting. Of course, they don't represent all of the world's incidents, but they did collect data from 30,000 incidents over the last year. So the thanks to the Verizon Threat Research Advisory Center and a bunch of industry partners, including CISA and the Secret Service, they were able to produce this report. So I'm just going to go over some high takeaways here. Um, External ways in. I think this is really important for service providers to understand where they need to be focusing to protect their clients. How are attackers getting into networks? How are losses happening? As in previous years, half of all breaches are coming in through legitimate credentials. We could drill down on that, but really, like the big one is if you guys have not enforced MFA everywhere at this point, please do so. And then, of course, the other half of incidents are, we're looking at phishing or social engineering and vulnerability exploitation. So that's the way attackers are coming in from the outside. Um, and then in terms of uh, how you could potentially protect from that. We are talking about device configuration and device security. Email and browser protections are really important. Of course, having an EDR solution or some kind of anti-malware solutions is very important. Scanning for vulnerabilities and remediating them in a timely manner. And then, of course, having solid backup and recovery plans. The reality is, it's not possible to stop all of the attacks. So when there is an incident that creates an impact, data recovery is important. Incident management is important. We're going to talk more about incident management later. Um, Protecting accounts themselves, of course, turning off accounts when they're not needed anymore, making sure people only have access to the things they need, making sure they have multi-factor authentication, and then lastly, some security awareness and training can help stop those system intrusions. Um,
Matt, just before you go on,
yeah,
I really want to emphasize for viewers out there, it's like to take away one thing is hackers aren't breaking in; they're logging in, and that, as you shown in that earlier chart, that's how they're getting in today. So it can't be just about prevent the defense piece. They're really walking through the front door. So it's making sure that awareness piece, and how do you arm your front line, who are your employees, not that they are the risk to your company, but they are your first front line, and potentially the first responder.
yeah, and there's a number of things you got to do in awareness to make that happen. Certainly, you need to go beyond phishing simulation, which unfortunately
Sure.
is as far as some companies go. This slide's really all about that. Like we said, half of all attacks from outsiders are coming in for those legitimate credentials. And this really just comes down to account management and account control. And we could go into the technical details, but that's why we have frameworks like CIS, security standards that really go to the nth degree on the details of what needs to happen to keep those accounts secure. And then the other big part here is with the understanding that even if you lock down your accounts as well as you can, there are going to be incidents. So making sure that you have those plans in place, those teams in
Mhm.
place, those platforms in place to effectively manage the incident so it doesn't lead to a major financial loss.
Yeah.
Um,
And Matt, there's a two-sided or two-headed dragon, if you like, on this. A lot of these, like you said, they log in. Is one is like you said, the security awareness of the staff, beyond phishing simulations and things like that. But what we have also noticed a lot is that larger or mid-sized organizations have got a series of vendors that they use, or smaller vendors that they use, who have got access into their systems to be able to update the overall database and things like that. And um, that the third party company control by clients to ensure that they have got the right cybersecurity processes in place as well is very, very important, because in a lot of cases, they don't aim for the mid-sized company because they know that the security framework of those companies will be fairly robust. So they go after the smaller fish who are like one or two or 10-man organizations, break in there, and then come in as a trusted vendor into the network of the larger company. And that is a big problem, because that is a growing problem that we are noticing that's going on in a lot of the North American markets right
Yeah, you're right. There was a time maybe 10 years ago where supply chain attacks basically didn't exist, and then we had was it TJ Maxx or
now.
Home Depot and Home Depot as well, I believe, were both supply chain attacks. So that really put it on the map, and it's been growing every year. And I didn't sum it up in these slides, but I do remember what it went when I looked at this report. We got supply chain attacks now accounting for something like I want to say it's 12 to 15% range of attacks. So that's like way, way, way up even over last year. And I think in the next few years, we are going to see that that's going to be a major attack pattern. So the time to sort of address those vendor risks is definitely now. I do want to cover, and so we see this. It's that partner line down there. It's pretty low in terms of whether this is an external or internal. But when you throw in, and there's some other data in the breach report where you talk about, well, this might not be an external person that has access to my system. This might be like a thing I buy from a vendor. When you start stacking that stuff up, it is becoming a major risk. But big news this year, and a lot of people are talking about why this is the case. But over the last 2 years, we're seeing this big trend, which is on a percent basis, external attacks are way down and insider attacks are way up.
Yeah.
And going through COVID, we saw a lot of shift from, a lot of people stopped having devices stolen, by cleaners, by, people that might have access to their hotel rooms. And we started seeing a lot more misplaced devices as people took their professional devices into unfamiliar spaces. So there was a shift in endpoint loss. That may be the resulting in some of these changes post COVID. But as you can see, that's a if this trajectory continues, we're going to have to take a large portion of our cybersecurity efforts and focus them inward on our own staff. If we break this down a little bit, when we talk about insider attacks, we're talking about two things. Okay, we're talking about privilege misuse, so a legitimate insider just deciding that they may be aggrieved, right? Or they may be taken advantage of by an outside party, but basically this is an intentional act by an insider. This is a huge percentage of these insider risks, and they're misusing their legitimate privileges, and that is incredibly difficult to account for. Again, it's the same stuff: account management, incident response, right? These are legitimate accounts, but you can do things to minimize the impact of legitimate accounts. And of course, awareness training goes a long way, as does, again, incident response in those cases. The other thing here is human error. It's just a big deal, and this is on its way up with privilege misuse. There's a lot of unintended consequences of human error causing major cyber impacts to organizations, and this is on the rise right now. So again, data control, data protection is really important, so that we don't have the wrong data laying around in the wrong place where the wrong person has access to it, or that will prevent or reduce those impacts from human error. Having the vulnerability remediation across your infrastructure, hardening your applications, and really again training your employees. If you train your employees, they will make less human errors. That's just the basics of the human psychology. Is we make mistakes in areas where we're like a little less comfortable, right?
Yeah, Matt, I just wanted to add too, because on the software side of my business, what I'm seeing is organizations wanting to consolidate the number of tools that they have, so they just have to worry about that one endpoint or that one solution that to secure that. So they're really kind of drawing those pieces in, and you're seeing software vendors offering more in their platform for that as well.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I know it's been 30 years of chasing after the single pane of glass, but it is true that if if you have more consolidated solution spaces, it's less opportunities for error.
I find the
Um,
pendulum swings back and forth, and the other thing I was going to suggest too is, or what I'm seeing and thinking that cybersecurity and privacy has to be a part of every functional business unit, no matter what they do. So there has to be ingrained that has to get ingrained into their day to day, and they may not think it's relevant, but the threat actors are looking for those exploits, those small ways in. So, I hope it doesn't come at the cost of like paranoia and suspicious, because before cybersecurity, you know, I was pretty open minded. Now I'm just suspicious of everybody and everything, and but we're trained to look for the anomaly and the vulnerability.
all right. Well, I'm looking forward to moving into topic of the day because this is one of the days where I get to be the layman. Really, I am not an incident response specialist. I'm a cybersecurity and security architecture generalist from a management perspective. But I've got two industry veterans here on the call today that can tell me and tell the audience about some pitfalls in incident management. And specifically today, we're talking about watcher surveillance, which I understand from my own research, but also with conversations with you guys, that this is increasingly a big challenge and a big problem as attacker organizations become more and more sophisticated on their side, in many cases dwarfing the maturity level of the organizations that they're attacking. And so we threw watcher surveillance as a concept in today's topic of the day, but who can help me define a watcher? What are we talking about here?
I,
Go for it, Nick.
I think incident response is well defined prior to cyber. So the business disruptions of the day were natural disasters or server outages and memory leaks or what have you. For the very first time, you have watchers. Incident response in the cyberspace is completely different. It is from the get-go. Your threat actors are trying to undermine it. If your
Let's back up here. We have to define threat actor. Okay.
Okay.
So
Your hacker. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, oftentimes the hacker, right? But in cybersecurity parlance, right, the reason we call threat actor instead of attacker or criminal or hacker, it's got a technical definition, right? And a threat actor is it could be a cybercrime gang, it could be an individual in a door room. I understand it could be lightning, any external force that can create a loss, right? But you're using that in the general term of, hey, there's people out there that mean us harm, right?
You got it.
So these people that mean us harm, these threat actors, they're in the business of causing that harm, or they have intent to cause harm, and there's an incident, right? Presumably in incident management, the organization that's being attacked knows there's an incident, and they've raised their hand and said, okay, it's incident time. We're going to start our process, or we're going to initiate our process. We're going to contact our whoever. In that environment, you're talking, these attackers are fairly sophisticated now, right? So what makes them a watcher? Like what's different now this year in 2024?
I think what's changing now is their tactics. So they are looking for or watching to undermine your response. And you're now hearing things about compromising your personal data so that you can access their children's information. And so they can use that as a ransom, as like, pay or I'm going to exploit your children. So you're hearing a lot more of those pieces, like the levels of where they're going and what they're doing. So they will allow communications to happen still, so that they have a front row to your response. And
So wait, are you saying that an incident's declared, right? At that point, the attackers already sort of they've already gotten their puck into the goal, right? And the company swings into action to try to defend themselves or do something about it. And there's people, the attackers are out there. What, they're waiting to see what team shows up to the table, and
no,
then they're attacking their personally. Like,
well, they're very much a part of observing the response. And you know, I would have thought it was urban legend, but the more MDRs I work with, like, there are large companies that will have anonymous people dial into their bridges, and it's not fear mongering. Because I resisted it for the longest time until I've been hearing it across the globe. So you're having them participate in trying to undermine, and it's almost, you think of those World War II Nazi propaganda type of thing, where they're just trying to like crush your spirit, because everywhere you go, there's your hacker, and it kind of forces you into submission that way. But you know, Matt, it actually happens even before the incident's declared. Investigations that happen in band, like on your, like, they're also observing that. So when you do investigations in front of them, you remove your element of surprise if you had to do a response. So it's even before the response. And as soon as they get in there, it's very tactful. Like, they'll look for a specific sets of information, including insurance documents, so they'll know how much you're insured, and they'll use that against you, not unbeknownst to many, that they know if they ask for $5 million, they know you have cyber insurance for $5 million.
So I spend most of my time in my client space, in my partner space, talking to them about what they need to do to, on what game they need to bring to the table, right? Mm-hmm. But it sounds like the attackers' game, what they're bringing to the table, is just as sophisticated. And I know it's become industrialized, that sure. You've got groups of people that are doing surveillance, right? And then they're gaining footholds, and then they're handing that off to other people that do discovery, right?
Yeah.
And then there's either whether you want to call it an implantation phase, or you want to call it some kind of capture, the actual detectable exploitation is happening. And what I think what I'm hearing from you is now, in the same way that organizations have their incident response teams, there's a dedicated group of people in some of these cyber crime gangs that are anti-incident response. Watchers is a label, but I'm sure our industry is going to come up with something more technical than that. Yeah. So they sound pretty sophisticated, right? There's like dedicated people that are just, that's all they're doing.
I don't know who these people are and what they are. I try to build to my customer specs and the problems that they're having. So I've never seen this in the flesh, but my customers have. So again, and this is that pendulum of like, well, you have to think like a bad guy, and so how extreme does it go? And you'll find that it's a deep hole sometimes. So how vulnerable people can be and the things that they will do. But they're willing to go to that personal exploitation, bring family members involved, impersonating, trying to drain your bank accounts. When I bought my car at the car dealership, because we know now 15,000 car dealerships are affected because of an attack.
Yeah, the CDK breach, right?
Yeah. So what I had to go through a whole number of checks and balances in the office when I bought my car, because the few weeks before, the hackers had impersonated someone's spouse to give clearance to the finance manager to take the next payment out of a different account, or send the payment from different accounts. It was just kind of remarkable that it happened at that level, and they're creative and they're just creative in what they'll do next. So it's a sad thing. Like, I had to stop watching the news because I deal with enough of the bad parts of humanity during the day. But it's the unfortunate piece of it.
So
they are watching.
So the other factor which I when you mentioned threat actors, before you were talking about somebody sitting in a basement or possibly a gang somewhere. But now threat actors are actually sponsored by state governments. There are full scale departments that are designed. So everyone's aware right now, for example, that in Asia there are state departments that are designed to steal IP from American defense organizations. Uh, People know the fact that one of the biggest revenue earners for North Korea today is their hacking team. So it's actually a source of revenue for the government to be able to
Yeah,
to do hacking worldwide.
ca tell us more about what you mean by state sponsored, because I know there's North Korea, right, which is they're publicly known to literally have people in uniform operating capture operations. They're stealing money, and I don't think anyone disputes that that's happening. It's a little more gray in some other circumstances, but there's different versions of this state sponsored, right? There's like people in uniform, and then there's what are the other roles? There it's a huge industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you see that the factor which you know even though right now, for example, and if you look at it from a more strategic perspective, you know uh, I would say that regardless of whether it is IBM or Cisco or Dell or anybody else, we are actually, from a cybersecurity perspective, facing we have a pop gun and we have a tank coming right against us. And the reason why I say that is the couple of things which over the last few years has changed. One is the fact that hackers right across the board, regardless of whichever country or whichever state actor they are, they cooperate. So you'll get one group that actually writes the ransomware. There's another one who delivers it. There's a third group that actually negotiates with the customer to get the money out of them, right? And these are all different gangs who are specialized in in the cooperation to be able to extort money out of people. In the deep dark web, you're now able to buy a platinum, gold, and a silver service. If you want to be able to hack a set of servers for a particular industry across a certain country, you can actually hire a platinum service, and you don't have to even write the hack. They will write the hack and give it to you, and all you have to do is implement it.
So we use the word gangs, and I know that that's common in our industry. It's a touchy word because the mental connotation is these people are not highly skilled, they're disorganized, and they might but really these are essentially corporations. In some cases, actually corporations,
Yes,
right?
yes,
That have a $1 billion contract with their state affiliated some contract, and then and they get protection, and then they have another $1 billion business, right?
yes,
That is not even necessarily the whole attack, but like they do business process outsourcing for someone else that's
right,
running the attack, right?
yes,
And that's the new mode, is in the same way that the cybersecurity industry, you were talking about the roll up, right? Where we've got these monoliths in the industry, right? And that's happening in the criminal world as well. And of course, we use the word criminal here in the West ubiquitously, but that word's a little funny because what's a criminal here is actually a state entity someplace else, right? A
right. It's
state
a
state
revenue
affiliated entity.
generation machine for them, right? So that's one aspect, and the other aspect, which is rapidly changing, is the chat GPT, the AI capabilities. The fact that these entities are using AI far more strategically than what we are using it to be able to defend, right?
Yeah,
And their basic funnel of attacks are completely changing because of the way that they're using AI.
it didn't make like the top like 5 in the Verizon breach report this year. But one of the few of the pages in there were dedicated to a Gen AI, and they've been monitoring the dark web. And a year ago, these cybercrime games, these threat actors were not using Gen AI.
Hmm.
And there's been a graph that looks like this over the last 12 months,
Correct.
where the organizations that are developing malware, right, are increasingly talking about Gen AI, implementing Gen AI, deploying Gen AI. And so this is everything from email to phone calls to, uh, email, you know, I, we're probably going to be seeing real time fake expert system driven like video robots in the not too distant future. So yeah, there's a lot going on there right now, and if you reel this out a few years, that's probably going to be become a major force in the industry.
Yeah.
You're right. I think that because there's such an obvious way to derive revenue from these tools, it's possible that the most innovative part of AI is happening in that space right now. There's a lot of people struggling to monetize in other places in the economy right now.
Correct.
I mean, I just wanted to add there, and at the expense of not sounding like someone I wear a tinfoil hat, the state sponsored stuff is actually a big thing right now. So in my opinion, I do believe that we should look at these cyber threats as war. I do believe World War III, or it will happen on a digital
Yes.
battlefield. Now, it's not, at the expense of trying to sound like I'm paranoid. I was just looking up over here. There is a branch of the U.S. military, U.S. Cybercom, a whole division that is focused on cybersecurity and cyber defense. So it's now an arm of the military. I think it has been since 2009 or 2014 or something like that. So it is the biggest threat. I don't think it's from the traditional military things that'll happen, but they can take out utilities, they can take out hospitals, they can take out our finances if we are complacent. And that's the one thing that I decide to speak in, because I'd much rather just stick to software and just build things that work. But there's too much complacency. Like, people aren't giving it or looking at these threats through the right lens, and the lens of war.
All right, so we have humongous criminal billion-dollar gang organizations that are, they're threat actor organizations that are constant stream of incidents every day of the week, right? They're operating businesses, right? And they've now normalized surveillance, not just to find where the data is in the company, but actually to keep an eye on the incident, right? And the incident response. So you talked about them trying to find documents. What do they do when they find, like, they've already got the gold, right? Presumably, that's why we're able to detect the incident. So what do they? I totally understand, and it's scary. And I've heard of this happening, but I didn't realize it had become standard practice of them extorting the incident responders, right, or the executives dealing with the incident.
Correct.
But what else are they doing? What else are they doing with that information about incident response?
So the information that they're breaching, there are a few things that can happen, and I'll take a step back for a second. And knowing that the gangs are now, there's almost like a ranking system, like a reputation that they have. So if you are breached, say it's ransomware, there is intelligence out there on that gang. Are they likely to give you the keys if you pay the ransom? Because what you're seeing is a second level of ransom happening is, okay, you'll get your key. Then they'll threaten to sell or publish your customer information, your patient information on the web, or sell it to another gang. So there's having that secondary threat as well. So it's just sad how far they'll go. So that's the type of things they'll do with documents. Is that?
Well, so but you said they were looking for insurance documents and they're paying attention to conversations. So why would they care? Why are they doing that?
Well, it usually it'll list out what your cyber insurance policy covers. So if you're covered for $5 million, the
ransom's $5 million.
The hackers will know you can afford to pay it because insurance will cover it. So now my customers, it's good practice that they're starting to store their insurance documents offline, either with their their MDR, their legal firm, or even within an out of band solution that they'll have.
Yeah. So, and that needs to start from basically you need to think really far ahead about that, right? You're binding your insurance for the year, and you need to start early because that's going to leave a trail, right?
So when an incident happens, if you want to take it from a farming perspective, it's like you got a chicken coop with a bunch of chickens in it, and you throw a fox inside, and all hell is going to break loose, right? Because all the chickens are trying to escape, right? And there's only a little gap to do that, and everyone's starting to communicate. And the hackers, to Nick's point, before they actually start the attack, they've already accessed your email systems. They know what's going on, right? And they're watching what you're trying to do, right? So can you imagine that you're actually trying to respond to an incident, and they're watching in real time what you are trying to do, and they're figuring out from you as to where your documents are, where's your IP, where are things that they want to be able to get access to, or the fact, like Nick said, they'll figure out the fact that your cyber insurance is $10 million or $5 million, and they'll start the ransom demand at 10, knowing that they will get 5. Right?
So
So this is standard, becoming standard practice now.
what are the things like? Okay, so preventing that. How do we prevent that? What are the things we need to protect, and how do we do that? It's you mentioned the insurance documents, so I understand we have to
Yeah.
protect that thing, which is tricky because insurers love to email that around, right? But um, make sure that that's stored in a safe place, but also maybe like not available in, to everyone in everywhere. So what other bits of information do we need to put in that box if this needs to be in a safe place?
Yeah. So, I mean, banking information is one. A lot of that is trying to, drain your bank accounts, imposter, send fake approvals to get those things. So, any type of that sensitive information that has to do with financial, has to do with, um, patient or employee or personal information, anything that would give them leverage over you in order to harm you. So, and it's hard because it reaches in every part of your business, whether protecting your IP, your equations, your formulas.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, Matt, the question is like the answer is everything. Like, a
Yeah.
business
So
is unique in so many ways, and there's always a
But
data.
there's like you can't protect everything in your organization
correct.
equally. This
Yeah,
this is
for
one of
sure.
the basic tenets of cybersecurity is you need to protect the stuff that matters more and more.
Right.
Um,
So Matt, the thing is, most organizations, and this has become like a thing that a lot of the companies have stopped doing, but it's something that I have been reiterating for the last couple of years. And I have asked this question whether it was India or whether it was in Canada or anywhere else that I've presented. And I said to a lot of companies, I said, first of all, before you talk about any solution out there, and I don't care which solution you're looking at, endpoint, incident response, and everything else, the first question you need to ask yourselves is, where is your risk register? What assets have you got listed in that risk register, and what have you got valued against your risk, the different risks? Like Nick says, your IP. There are things that, if, for example, they get hold of, your company's going to go bankrupt. So those are the ones that you're going to defend first. So that your risk register will tell you that these are the assets. Again, there are some losses that may hurt, but you can mitigate the loss by cyber insurance or anything else. But there are some losses that you cannot mitigate. So if a company loses its IP data, right, they're gone. So have a risk register, have a look at as to what are the assets against that have got the highest value, and those are the ones that you need to be able to have in that protective bubble, that air gap bubble that the hackers cannot see. And that is one of the things
so
that we talk about.
specifically, we're talking about risk assessments. We're talking about scan results. We're talking about certainly the registers that have dollar amounts on assets,
Hmm.
right? Um, Presumably procedural playbooks too, right? You said the insurance stuff. I think I would imagine you mentioned the communications that so I would imagine emergency contact lists or emergency contact channels for managing the incident maybe are out of band or alternative band. Does that also sound like
Yeah. Certainly communications is where a lot of the strategies are devised. So, knowing who you'll be calling, yeah, it's it's one of the core functions that could bring you the most harm if you just had an open line. And I think, I mean, I believe that it's in my DNA. I grew up at BlackBerry, and we believe in secured and private communications always.
All right, so I get it. I believe you.
Yeah.
This is a big problem. Theoretically, we want to air gap, but I'm going to tell you, I've been trying to sell air gapped backups to people for the last 20 years. I mean, sell like from a mental perspective, like this idea that your backups need to be. Back in the tape days, it was easy. You
With the
took the
tape
tape
off.
out, right?
And
But
yeah,
everything's interconnected these days, and air gapping, your backup data is really hard. So a lot of organizations aren't doing that effectively. That's um, a big tragedy right now in cybersecurity. How do we get how do we get organizations to do that easily? Because backups are super hard. The data is humongous, right?
Yeah.
How do you hide that? Right? It's giant. This sounds like an easier problem to solve. I know that was like the inkling of. Now's a great time for the ShadowHQ birth story, I guess.
Sorry. Yeah, Matt. Obviously not turning this into anything other than the topic, but yeah, I mean, what we're committed to is building that. So ShadowHQ is your out of band virtual operation center or virtual bunker. So all the tools, all the communications, all the assets, all the automation you need in one place for an extended period of time to manage through an incident from a position of strength without being compromised or undermined any further. So one of our clients had called us the Air Force One of a cybersecurity attack, which I thought that was pretty cool. But if you look at the entire brand, like ShadowHQ, although it's a hexagon, the inspiration was the pentagon, like the largest fortress that we know in our world, anyways. So we are taking that militarized type of approach to it. We do believe that we'll do everything we can to make our clients respond from that position of strength, protect them as best as we can, and protect their communications, their contact list, their press releases. Not just that, but even everyone has a playbook for an incident like ransomware, perhaps. But the problem is at 2 a.m. when those things hit or your alarms start going off, who's going to find that binder? So instead of it being a lifeless document, we automate that, and it becomes the basis of your response. And we take what could take several hours in a secured environment, and we execute that within seconds. So we cut through the chaos. We try to remove some of that human emotion, and our hope is with a quick recovery, is a quick response, is a quick recovery before you get into the media and before they drain your bank accounts. You would have been ahead of them. They're not undermining your response, and they're not watching and listening to where you're going next. So that's what our commitment is now.
Yeah. So I know for anyone that spends time, in the U.S. down near Washington D.C., we have a lot of critical federal employees that carry around special phones, right? They have special SIM cards in them, so that if there's a major disaster, they have the ability to communicate to each other, even if maybe that cell phone network's unavailable. And they carry special passes and other stuff like that. It sounds like ShadowHQ's mission is to be that alternative, special, out of band, not just storage location to air gap things, but also really that emergency communication network necessary to safely manage that incident. I certainly don't want to have to worry about my kids when I'm defending my employer.
Sure.
So Matt, think of it in a nutshell, in 3 words: an air-gapped bunker.
Yeah,
that's basically what it is, right? Because you're air gapped so the hackers cannot see it inside it, and in the bunker you do your secure communication. You got your most secure assets in there which they cannot see, and it gives you a chance to be able to come up with a plan that you can then go outside the bunker to be able to execute. But you can do it in the level of secrecy and in the quietness where the hackers cannot see what you're trying to do, and then come up with a solution, whether it is to the media, whether it is legal, whether it is marketing, whatever it is. That air gap bunker
Yeah.
is missing in a lot of the incident response solutions, where you have a chance to pause and think of what you're going to do next, instead of trying to be reactive and act, sort of do everything on the go, and everyone's seeing what you're trying to do.
I mean, you brought up a very good point, or mention of like marketing and human resources. So when talking to CISOs during an incident, whether they like it or not, there's a convergence of crisis management, disaster recovery, continuity, all looking like surrounding the CISO. How do I communicate in this new in this time when everything's compromised? So for us, Shadow HQ is also secure workplace for your crisis management team. So the board,
Mm-hmm.
the executive team, the public relations team, they can have their secure corner and perform their functions without tripping over the incident response. What this does for the CISO and the security team, it lets them focus on what matters most, getting the bad guys out and getting the servers back up and running. So so thinking that through. Now, unlike other type of emergencies or incident management, these are very different. Cybersecurity is very different. You can expect downstream audits, lawsuits, insurance claims. So there will be a collection of evidence, protecting evidence, and ensuring it's accessible in there. So that's what Shadow HQ thinks about. It's preparedness, the response, and well into the recovery, right up until supporting through the analysis and the lessons learned, and implementing those lessons learned, and yeah, all that data and analytics and everything like that.
So
Thank you.
I remember this time it really was not that long ago, when people thought it was crazy to put their backups in the cloud. And companies like Veeam and Datto actually, believe it or not, humongous powerhouses in our segment, the MSP segment, right now. Um, they started their businesses with this idea of taking the backups, right, and putting them someplace safe, separate, right? And I think from a textbook philosophy perspective, it made a lot of sense. It's now become the predominant model. There was a long period of time of people scratching their heads about it and wondering, like, why would I put my backups someplace where I can't get to them? I suspect if we fast forward a few years here, we're going to see, just like MSPs are externalizing IT departments, we are going to see continued investments in externalizing incident management, not just into incident management teams, but into safe places where incident management can happen. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and a big portion of our partners are MSPs and MSPs, because they are on the front line, and they are usually providing advisory services or tabletop, or they are the ones that get the call during the breach. So there is a great story with Shadow HQ and MSSPs, and how they can support multiple clients and through Shadow HQ, but making sure that they all have that secure communications and that proactive communications with them, and things like tabletop exercises, advisory services, and when you pull that fire alarm, you're not just telling your internal people, but you're telling your vendors or your MSSPs that, hey, something's going on here, we might need your help. And some people like that. That's billable time.
Well, thanks for filling us in on this new, I guess it's a new business unit is what it sounds like to me. I'm going to wait for the academic reports to repeat that outside this call, but it seems like a new capacity that's professionalized inside the threat actor ecosystem, and we need to respond to it as an industry. I brought you guys here as experts, but do you guys have any takeaways for today that we can share with the audience? Like anything you learned? Any surprises in the Verizon report? I don't know.
Not particularly. No.
I was shocked to see the insider threat increase as much as it has. And it's got my mind thinking about how do we further protect that, and what use cases can we better support our clients. But just hygiene. So account hygiene, good practices, and embracing some of the principles of compliance like SOC 2 or ISO, when the permissioning and the access controls, they're there for a reason, and they might save you a lot of pain in the long term.
I certainly, I'm going to be thinking more about not just, I talk a lot about having incident response plans and creating governance around that and managing the life cycle, but I don't think about enough and talk about enough and tell people enough that the place and the way that you do it matters. I can definitely see opportunities for ShadowHQ to help out our partners. So thanks for bringing a new thing to be afraid of to the table today.
I have to look for my tinfoil hat somewhere, but I don't like it. I don't like what's happening out there. So.
All right, guys. This is the moment where I'm supposed to tell you what next week is. So give me a moment.
Yeah.
Next week we have demystifying DLP, data loss prevention. Where we're bringing Asif Latai and Guy Bavli from Actifile. So we're also going to be going over the fair risk assessment model. So if you want to come learn about DLP, we'll see you next week. Of course, we're always here every Friday afternoon, live on LinkedIn, and our full video library is over on YouTube. Like, watch, subscribe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
thanks, Matt.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Thank you, guys.